Okay, you will later in 10 session, right? Stefan, is it on? Yeah. Hi, good morning to everyone. We are just about to begin the EADTU-EU Summit 2022. It's my pleasure to welcome you all, to those present in this room, as well as those who are just following us, through the internet. We have a very fully packed agenda with very interesting topics, covering different issues that we've been working on, within the EADTU. Issues that range from higher education emergency, a very interesting topic. And we will move on to the digital program and digital education, as well as the central topic, on micro-occupations. We will finish this summit with the roundtable discussing, and debating on the different issues. So welcome you all. I hope this conference, and this summit will be fruitful in terms of making, contributions. Now it's my pleasure, to give the floor to Tina Delva, Deputy Head Higher Education Unit from the European Commission. Tina, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here physically again here in Brussels, because it has been a long time since we were able to do that. But of course, also a warm welcome to the online audience that is watching this event as well. But especially also a warm welcome to the people here in the room. So I hope this will also give us the opportunity to have some networking opportunities later on, because it's really a pleasure from the Commission side to be here at your summit of the European Association of Distance Teaching Universities. The topic of digital transformation in higher education is very topical and pertinent to the opportunities and challenges that higher education institutions are facing these days. I think not only based on the experience with the COVID-19 pandemic, but also in view of the long-term challenges that are awaiting and that the higher education sector is taking up. And of course, also, unfortunately, with the situation in Ukraine, where I'm happy that we also have a representative here today at the event, because of course, also here we can learn from what open universities and what the digital technology can offer to help. So what is at stake? The digital transition gives universities a fundamental role in equipping really the students and researchers with the digital skills and competences that they need in a new reality and in the promotion of innovation and new technologies. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have witnessed the need for further digital skills for students and for staff, going sometimes from basic skills, but especially also to more advanced skills related to the understanding of new technologies such as artificial intelligence, high performance computing, cloud computing, robotics. And of course, also here, what we need here is also transdisciplinary approaches so that more students and staff from different disciplines can also be acquainted with these skills and competences. And of course, we need the education and training systems that are equipped to address these challenges. Basically, also a lesson learned from the pandemic is that, of course, high quality education should leave no one behind, whether it's physical or digital. We have seen during the COVID-19 pandemic that the higher education sector was able to adapt to the situation, but it also became evident that digital solutions depending on the type of the higher education institutions involved, can be either a self-standing instrument, or of course can be complemented by physical activities as well. What we have seen is also a differing capacity of higher education institutions to adapt to changing circumstances in view of the digital capacities, and also a varying capacity of staff to adapt. So this is where further support is needed from all levels to make sure that in different higher education institutions, the capacity can be scaled up. Another issue that we saw in the pandemic is, of course, the interoperability between systems. A closer cooperation between universities also brings about a closer digital connectivity. And here we have seen that there is still a complex landscape when it comes to IT infrastructure in order to get connected. This is where, from the Commission side, we are intending to help the university and the higher education sector to make connected universities a reality. For that, we need sufficient digital capacity and infrastructure for the higher education sector, and the more widespread use of digital platforms and trusted technologies. With a solid European base that can really help for education and research needs to be accommodated in an integrated manner. And finally, of course, higher education institution can also offer innovative education technology developments through the spin-offs or scale-ups, and they can also leverage the potential of the growing European education technology industry. And of course, in all of this, we have, of course, a lot to learn from the open universities who are in many instances already further advanced in this endeavor. And in developing the European policies in this area, we are building on the digital education plan, the digital education action plan that was adopted for the period 2021-2027, covering all sectors of education and really presenting a vision to boost the digital capacity and enhancing digital competences in education. In higher education, it has two priorities: developing a high-performing digital education ecosystem, really aiming at improving the digital capacity, and secondly, to enhancing the digital skills and competences for the digital transformation. So in the field of higher education, what does this entail? For example, digital transformation plans, supporting them, development of digital skills, pedagogy and expertise, and including on emerging technologies. And also the high quality digital education content that is needed to ensure that also the digital education can meet the standards of high quality education. And of course, also importance for the digital transition is also on how to promote further STEAM in higher education, and also the participation of women therein. And these actions support for the digital transition was also what emerged from our consultation on the European strategy for universities that the Commission has adopted in January this year. And in our consultations, we listened to the sector to hear the needs with regard to the digital transition, and also on possible solutions. And I would also like to thank the European Association EADTU for being an active partner in these consultations, and we count on you also on your partnership for the further implementation of the strategy. This higher education package, so this consisting of this European strategy and a proposal for a council recommendation on transnational cooperation, was adopted by the ministers responsible for higher education in April this year. And we are happy that they maintained the ambition level that was put forward by the European Commission. Basically, the member states in the council, the ministers have given their support to 4 key objectives. First of all, to strengthen the European dimension of higher education and research, to consolidate universities as lighthouses of our European way of life. So protecting the academic freedom and the skills that are needed for the future. Third priority, also very relevant in view of this conference, is to empower the universities as key actors in the digital and green transition. And lastly, the last objective, to reinforce universities as drivers of Europe's global role and leadership. And concretely in the strategy, we have proposed several initiatives that are promoting the digital dimension of higher education. One of the flagships that we have put forward is the further rollout of the European Universities Initiative. We are aiming for a scaling up to about 60 European universities, covering around 500 higher education institutions across Europe by mid-2024. And one of the elements that these European universities are implementing is that they are creating European inter-university campuses. And in most alliances, this is also digital inter-university campuses, and where also these alliances of universities are working together on challenge-based approaches, and several of them are also tackling the digital challenges. A second important flagship initiative that we are putting forward is the further scaling up of the European Student Card Initiative. This links also to the interoperability question that I mentioned before. The aim is to abolish the mobility paperwork, both for students and the higher education institutions, and to abolish the on-site registration procedures, and to make sure that the IT systems behind all of this, of the different universities, can work closer together. And of course, we know it is ambitious to interconnect all the higher education systems in Europe that wish to cooperate transnationally, and it takes time, and it demands a lot of efforts on all the fronts. But in the long run, it will save time, money, and a lot of administrative hassle for the institutions. So we are working together with the sector to make sure that we can make it happen. So, for example, a help desk is now being set up to make sure that the higher education institutions have the support they need in the implementation of the several components of the European Student Card Initiative, such as, for example, the Erasmus without paper component. So we count on the cooperation of the higher education institutions to help us further develop this initiative. So with regard to the key priority of the strategy on the twin green and digital transition, we have proposed several other actions in the digital field. Let me sum up just a few of them. So as mentioned before, digital skills and competences are key, and we will continue to support transnational cooperation in this respect through our policies and programs, for example, through Erasmus+, but also through Horizon. And another program, the Digital Europe program, for example, will provide specialized education and training programs in cutting-edge digital technologies, but also in multidisciplinary courses in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, microelectronics, and high-performance computing. And note that several calls for proposals have been launched under the Digital Europe program. I think there is one call closing almost now. A new call will open in September. So there are quite some opportunities there for higher education institutions to get funded to implement their plans. We will also work on a European platform to promote cooperation between higher education institutions. This is following up on a feasibility study that was done in the context of the Digital Education Action Plan. We will also further develop our Erasmus Plus Jean Monnet activities to make sure that we can recognize at EU level the efforts of universities that are driving the digital transformation. And we will also help universities in co-developing guidelines and principles for allowing mutual access to services and enabling seamless knowledge and data exchange. But of course, the entire spirit of the European strategy is that it's not a top-down approach. There was a long consultation process both with the higher education sector and with member states. So, of course, to realize the ambitions that are there in the sector, in the member states and at the European level, of course, action is needed at all levels. So the European strategy also has a plea to member states to support the higher education sector in this field. And of course, the higher education sector itself is very much invited to take up this challenge as well, with the support of the national and the European level. Having said this, note that the European strategy for universities is addressed to all types of higher education institutions, including also open universities and universities with a larger digital component. So this is also a plea to the open universities to share your experience, to go a step further and to share your experience and your lessons learned also with the more traditional higher education institutions, so that the benefits and the possible hurdles that you have encountered, that they can be shared with other higher education institutions as well. So with this, I've just shared a snapshot of what we are planning to do at the European level. But I'm very much looking forward also to hearing your views and challenges, so that we can also take them with us when further developing our policies and trying to be at your service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tina, for sharing your cutting-edge projects and ideas and insights into this conference topic. We probably have time for a very quick question, if there is one. Yes, please.
Good morning, everybody. Michael here from the European University Institute. It's just a question, really. You mentioned the European platform for cooperation on higher education institutions and the feasibility study, as several of us have contributed to the interviews, at least for the study. Would that be public or so?
I would. Yeah. Thank you for the question. I would need to check with my colleague Ivana, who is in the back of the room, who is leading the study. But in any case, what I know, Michael, is that we are following up on this. So the study, the study was cross-cutting across the different sectors of education. So not only higher education, but also lower education fields, secondary education, etc. And the main outcome of the study was that the highest need was actually felt in the higher education sector for such a platform. This is why now in the higher education sector, we are together, indeed, the different services in the Commission, we are conducting some further consultations to better tailor the needs, to have a concrete, more tailored idea of what are the concrete needs in the sector. And we will undertake further consultation activities, because of course we want to make sure that we are not duplicating anything that already exists on the market, so that we are really corresponding to a need that is there. But I'm sure you will be invited for further consultation activities, and I invite you perhaps in the break to get in touch with Ivana, who is following this topic more in depth. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Tina. I think that unfortunately we have no more room for questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thanks a lot for being here. It's been a pleasure. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to Svetlana Shitikova. She's the coordinator of the National Erasmus Plus office in Ukraine. And Svetlana will be talking about a very interesting issue, such as higher education in emergency. Svetlana, without further ado, thank you very much for being here. Without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed for the invitation. And also with all our hearts, we would like to thank all of you for your care, for your support, for your help and solidarity with Ukraine. And just to say that, first of all, we really value it a lot. And as you might know, that Ukraine is a big country and has been living their lives with all the dreams, with all the challenges which had been broken in the very first day of war, 77 days ago, by Russians, who actually started this war 8 years ago. And we all want that if we do not stop them, then there would be a continuation. And now, in fact, the reality we live is absolutely different. And a lot of losses currently of people. And every day I update my presentation with the life of people who just lost their future. Not just military people, but civilians. What is more, children, the kids, and the students, and the teachers, who are now, in any case, being everywhere, are continuing their work, their front line. Is it humanitarian or economic? Is it military or educational front line? And as you could imagine, that within all this invasion, the educational system is still working and the educational processes are operational in exactly the way and the part which we could do. Whenever our students are, our kids are, our teachers are from the school, from the higher education sector, from the vocational education and training, and from all other spheres, everybody is contributing to the further development of the country, in spite of the fact that there is a war. And the reality our teachers are teaching the distance learning is well shown in this picture, that there are a lot of teachers who are not military at all, but they took this initiative and they took this challenge and now defending the nation, defending Ukraine, and defending the European values. In fact, we're all defending the human values, just against the aggressor, against the invaders who actually, in fact, were educated within the Bologna process system, already working and operational in Russia since 2005, and with the strong support of the European Commission already since 1993, when we joined and opened the programs for Russia to support the promotion of European values, to the promotion and support of and modernization of higher education system, and being convergence and just recognized all over the world. So again, the reality is that some of our students will remain the students forever. And the reality is that in fact now the Erasmus coordinators, the staff and the teaching staff, the researchers who has been working within European programs and other international programs are now the key targets, especially at the regions which are in the cities which are now under invasion. And that's really threatened because, and they are threatened, even though I'm sure you watched that in Kherson, they continue this manifestation in front of the tanks. So we are not afraid of the tanks, but being defending all the values we share, starting from the very beginning of joining the program and in 1993 of the European part within Tempus, Erasmus Mundus, Jean Monnet, and the impact of these programs already now seen a lot within the educational institutions and also within the system, like higher education in particular. And if you have a look into the higher education system in Ukraine, you can find out that we really have a large number of higher education institutions. It's a huge network. And in the sense of the universities, institutes, and academies, we have 281 is higher education institutions, while also plus the colleges, which provides the pre-tertiary education, which also is considered a part of higher education. We have over 500 higher education institutions. And this network is now under optimization, of course, and so we are working to be concentrated on the higher education as the quality itself. And the number of students nowadays are really getting less due to this war. And in fact, if you just think of the territory which now is under invasion, that's if we compare it to the whole Greece, in fact, in the square kilometers, or like a part of Spain, or like one second of the one part of Italy. So that's really a huge challenge, which we are coming through all. But in spite of that fact, the 24 regions or oblasts of Ukraine is continuing the educational process. And 12 of them are even doing it in the blended format, so combining even the face-to-face opportunity. And the students and the staff, sometimes there's been within the classes like sheltering and doing their classes, providing their classes and teaching their staff. Within the higher education system, if we do a short snapshot, then we can see that a lot of things done already and implemented thanks to the support of the European Commission and to all international partners to modernize the system and to make it comprehensive within different countries. And in particular, we all are working in line with the Bologna process instruments, implementing our association agreement of European Union and Ukraine. And if you have a look into the distance learning system, the infrastructure had been built in the majority of universities before war, and it was the innovative one. And some of our universities even created their own learning management system to implement the distance learning and to implement the innovations and become also the parts and the parts of the majority of rankings. So now we have a lot of losses within, like top up, of course, to the people, the staff, the students who are now everywhere and trying to continue the process of education. We also lost a lot of infrastructure, which we really hope and are looking forward to reconstruct and with your support, and also to see that we have done a lot of our homework and a lot still are to be done. And we prepared also a short video for you to understand what is the higher education system in Ukraine and vocational education and training system in Ukraine, and also what are the key priorities and challenges at the moment are passing by within all Ukraine. The Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine has been working a lot and has been done already to support the educational system continued, the educational process to be ensured. Furthermore, at schools, at higher education, and in other spheres, while they also provide the everyday, almost every week, the updates of what is going on in the system, the educational system, and what are the needs, in particular with the short descriptions of the projects, which could be interesting or could be possible for international partners to be funded further. And some of them are already covered, the others are in priority. And we would really appreciate if you join all these efforts of our higher education institutions and also the ministries to cooperate and provide your contribution towards the priority of reforms. and in particular the open universities, which we have been communicated a lot already, and I will stop a little bit on that later on. Just a short highlight also on the strategy of the higher education, which have been developed for so many years, and so we were lucky to have it approved during the war, but still we have the strategy, still we have the tasks to be fulfilled together with the international community, and we really invite you to join all our efforts in that work immediately. Just as a progress of higher education, there were several initiatives by the educational institutions where your network and your association could contribute a lot already. And they are in red presented here, and that's also about the admissions. This is about the e-admission and the system which we need to elaborate and as fast as possible. And if we see also a lot of things already done to ensure the integration not only of the students but also of the staff whenever they are now, like being in the shelter in Ukraine, because there is no safe place in Ukraine, and there had been a lot of attacks every day and every night. And just during the classes, you can also hear these sirens, which really are not that helping to provide the educational process though. And I would like to draw your attention to the online admission project, which is communicated also by the Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine recently during the meeting of the donors, where the support is really critical. And there is a short description of this project with the different contacts, and we can provide it to you. And actually there are the links which just put you through directly to all the proposals, all our urgent and emergent needs within this part of the cooperation which we really need within it. And coming to the Open University. This initiative has come from different organizations, and we were really very much surprised that the majority of universities had been working together with the international partners in parallel, and many of them were doing like the same thing. Then since we are coordinating the Erasmus program and working with every university in Ukraine, we heard from one and the other and decided that a strong synergy would be exactly the better effect to have a kind of a national project for supporting the solidarity between Ukrainian universities, providing the education and exchanging and interacting with each other. And nowadays, Ukrainian universities understand absolutely that they are not competitors anymore within Ukraine, but they are now serving to help to save every student, every pupil, and to need the cooperation as much as possible. And for example, we have Bukovian State Medical University, who hosts on the distance learning platform the students from other medical universities which are now under invasion, or the premises were destroyed totally. So that's the reality also where our universities are already strong. And just as the goal of the Open University within Ukraine, it's just, I think you would understand that it is a little bit maybe different from your context of Open University understanding. But that's a creation of open education, digital environment and ecosystem for providing quality higher education for students relocated within Ukraine to other regions in Ukraine and also abroad, as well as for the educational opportunities for foreign students, and also the wider Ukrainian community has the possibility to join for some short, like informal courses as well, and who are abroad and who are here within Ukraine, and also based on the cooperation and interaction between Ukrainian universities and with the EU universities and other countries and international partners, as well as integrating this stuff, the teaching staff into the academic staff and teaching staff and research staff into the teaching process and educational process as it is. And if we go further to just see the list to do within this open university creation, we could consider this idea as the piloting, possible piloting maybe of the European Universities Alliances initiative, where Ukraine already could be an associated partners, but what we see from the organization of these alliances, it also could be a kind of good prototype of Ukrainian, European or international open university with the like no borders, and also with a lot of shared resources, which could be used by Ukrainians now all over the world. That's actually the initiative group of few universities now, and we really invite you and each of your member, each of the university to join this initiative and to continue elaborating this proposal. We still have a lot of things to do within the preparation of this concept, finalization of this concept, but the working group is really very active, and tomorrow also we are having this meeting. So once you are interested in joining this, please, you're very, very welcome. It is going to be online, so everybody could join it. Just to show that there are a lot of opportunities for cooperation within Erasmus program already in place. And there is still one call open for Erasmus virtual exchanges. We invite you also to join this initiative together with Ukrainian universities, and to see that there are over 30 calls for proposals which are open for Ukraine and cooperating with the program countries within the Erasmus Plus program, and also a lot of things already done. And the statistics, if you have a look, this is not only the statistics of students involved and young people benefited from the program, but these are the life-changing points of a lot of young generation, and also the academics, the researchers who now really teach different, they live different, and also they now in the moment they are defending the values of all of us and defending Europe, defending the whole world, resisting all this, unfortunately, really traumatic and really horrible reality we're all in. Thank you all again for all your support, cooperation, and we are looking forward that together with your network, we will build this open university, and together we'll continue interacting and cooperating with bringing the new generation, which we are sure will not allow the war happen again. And we will welcome you in Kiev, in Ukraine, in Kharkiv, in Odessa, in Kherson, in Ukrainian cities soon after the victory.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Svetlana, for sharing all your views on this very sad event, and also for just bringing forward, the Ukraine Open University, which is really a very interesting topic. Okay, so we are just running in the back of time, but we still have time for one question, perhaps two, if they are short. Yes, please.
I can shortly. Thank you very much. I'm Jakub from European Students' Union. First of all, I would like to ask about the initiatives that we were conducting. For example, when it comes to onboarding for the online universities, you would need any support to also pass the information forward, first of all, to students internationally, but of course we are having contacts with the Ukrainian Students' Union as well. So this part we can definitely also convey the information there. I have a second question, more technical, because we are also receiving some requests from the Ukrainian universities when it comes to the simple forward-looking support in rebuilding the infrastructure. We are having those requests as well to support to convey the information individually. I was wondering is there any maybe organized already a maybe centralized fund that would distribute this money, this support within the different universities, or we are still in the moment where this is more like individual requests? So I'm just asking it, but also suggesting it on the different meetings that at some point, I think that unifying some stream of donations towards rebuilding higher education sector will be crucial to achieve. So I was wondering if you are maybe aware of some fund like that.
Thank you very much for the very good question. And again, would like to pass the thanks and appreciation from the students network in Ukraine, like Erasmus Student Network and also Erasmus Mundus Students Alumni Network, who are also working now very hard on helping within the humanitarian support, and also to provide, to find the opportunities for students and young people to find the grants for the living abroad if they are there, and also to find the solution and help to fleet the students if there is any opportunity. And it was a strong support from the Erasmus family and from also European Student Association, and that is really appreciated from their side. And we also working together with the student network on different initiatives while they are finding the opportunities in one stop, saying like study for Ukraine. So that's the intention, to find these opportunities and got the education, like short-term education, and then to provide this to rebuild Ukraine after the victory. About the funding, I'm sure that it is really good idea, and the Ministry of Education and Science is considering it and working in that direction. While we know that European Commission is also doing the work for the establishing this fund to support Ukraine, and currently mostly again different universities are in different situation, and some of them do not have access to their bank accounts, so and even they cannot receive any help being there under like constant bombarding, and then the infrastructure is not there and then the people are not there. So then again, at this moment it is working mostly on the case-by-case basis, and since every university is in absolutely different situation and with different needs, that is taken care of by different approaches at the moment. But I think that we need to think and work on that. There is a specific website devoted to the help of Ukraine, and also the Ministry of Education and Science collected all the information on the needs required for that.
Thank you very much, Ivana. Yes, please. Yeah.
Just a short question, perhaps more addressed to the EADTU organization. Is there something you can, with regard to the Open Ukraine University, is there anything that you can share based on your experience, or maybe from your members that could be relevant for this project?
Sure. George or anyone or myself, I can just,
many of our activities are directed at sharing expertise. Most actually of our activities are projects, task forces, and events. And these are our first contacts now at this moment with the initiative of the establishing this Open University of Ukraine. And I see this as a start of further collaboration. And we will have our General Assembly meeting this afternoon at EADTU, and we have the Ukraine situation also on our agenda, and we will collect initiatives from our member universities on how we can support and establish further collaboration.
yeah, Pete, please.
My name is Pete Hendricks. I was just thinking about the refugees in Europe. I was just thinking about the millions of refugees, mainly women, who are in Europe now. I'm a displaced person in Europe, not only also in Europe. They are not covered by, as far as I can see, perhaps I'm wrong, by the European programs as such. Are you aware of initiatives taken for them, for displaced persons, who are here around in our countries, knowing the language, discontinuing their studies, perhaps with young women, not getting the degree at last, and so on and so on. And so that's also needing a need of education for the job market. So it's also an enormous need, and actually they are not covered by the programs here. Therefore, how to do that.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to contribute, of course, the strong synergy, which is also one of the priority of the Erasmus program, and the interdisciplinarity and cross-sectoral cooperation, which is extremely in heart of the Open University initiative of the group. And I suggest that once we are finished this idea, and hopefully that next week we will send you also this the document, which represents the more structural objectives and more structural list to do, and where we could see also your contribution would be crucial to make it happen with the resources already available, and not to duplicate something which is already and can be provided by your network. And in particular, also we appreciate that some associations have hosted and invited the Ukrainian universities to become members, and without paying fees. That's extremely important currently, that our universities are integrated in as many professional networks as possible to further just continue being also professionally grown and having the access to the modern research, to the most recent results of researches and educational innovations, which is not available for them due to several circumstances and specifically due to the need.
Tina, just a short comment.
Yes, if I may further compliment based on the question of fees for those refugees that are now here displaced in Europe. And note that European Union, they have activated the temporary protection directive, which means that refugees coming from Ukraine, they have the right to social security and looking for a job in Europe. And also to have access to primary and secondary education. And also member states can decide to also give free access to higher education as well. And so this is one important, I think one of the biggest helps for the people arriving here. And then with regard to higher education for Erasmus Plus, we have also opened up opportunities. So the regular mobility of students and staff has now also been opened up to refugees coming from Ukraine. So, for example, students can come on short-term, once they are subscribed in university, also they can subscribe to short-term mobility traineeship, or even long-term mobilities of up to 12 months. And those students, for example, are automatically classified as students from disadvantaged opportunities. So they, within the country, they then get the maximum grant amount that they can get as students. Another possibility to further help and integrate refugees, students and staff in Ukraine is through the EADTU projects, a little bit of European jargon to say the cooperation projects between universities and other partners. Even the existing projects are allowed to, on a voluntary basis, if they wish, they can reorient the funds that are not yet used to help refugees from Ukraine. And so these are already flexibilities that are applicable as we speak. And then from the Commission side, we are also working together with the NARICs, the recognition authorities, both for students and staff, to make sure that their qualifications are easier recognized in Europe as well, and also for the staff. So, for example, we organized a webinar together with the Italian NARICs in April, and I think it was attended by more than 1,000 people from the recognition world. So this webinar is also still, you can rewatch watch-its. Guidelines will be produced, so this is really to help with further integration also of refugees in the European higher education sector. Sorry, this was just to clarify.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
That we will introduce these possibilities in their own institutions. Thank you.
And if I may just very shortly also reflect on that, and there is the link to this webinar actually of the recognition. I really encourage you to disseminate it widely within your schools, universities, and that so all educational sector, because there is the explanation in very details of all the system, how it is working in Ukraine and how it could be recognized and how can you verify the education that got prior education in Ukraine. And then also about this flexibility, which is currently really appreciated, and we found a lot of new opportunities and more opportunities for Ukrainian temporary relocated people, like what we also would like you to concentrate in case there is the also opportunity for cooperation, that we have like a theory our students are teaching at our universities in distance learning, while they really need some practical like traineeship, but also the practical classes or practice oriented classes, and like access to the labs, access maybe to the virtual labs or other software which would help them, just simulators which would help them to obtain this practical skills, like for example also for medical students, because for them, you know, without practice it is absolutely impossible to become the doctors, and we really are now not worrying about ourselves, you know, in the pension, having the generation that might lose this practical part. So that is why this part of the support also is extremely required in terms of the cooperation between universities, which we see could complement also to this like blended approach to the learning. And in particular, what I would like to say about this also directive for the temporary protected status, there are still on site within different member states not clear understanding of this temporary protection status, and being, for example, Erasmus students, grant person here in Europe, like that's also the cases on the border when they ask the students, so if you are the Erasmus student but not a refugee or fleeing from Ukraine, then you need to have visa for study, then you need to have like a specific invitation, so you're not going to receive this temporary protection status because you're Erasmus student. So there was some like not yet well just guided situations within these statuses, and then this is not only about Ukraine, but not only about Erasmus, but also other programs when they receive this additional funding for the year.
Thank you very much, Anna. Miss EADTU is very eager to collaborate. We've got a long experience in this topic, and as George said, in our General Assembly, one of the issues will be precisely concerned with specific actions that we as EADTU, you know, we can promote. So it will be a pleasure to collaborate. Thank you very much for this excellent presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll take over the chairing now for the rest of the morning until the panel. Let's continue with Ivan Wopperijs from the Dutch University. He's one of our partners in the project that EADTU is coordinating on called Digital Pole. It's a response to the call by the European Commission for expertise related to the COVID crisis and supporting universities European-wide on further digitalizing their education. Ivan, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, floor
is mine. Welcome. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ivan Wopperijs. I work at the Open University of the Netherlands, Open Universiteit, based in Heerlen. And I'm a partner in this project. I'm working in 2 work packages actually, and I will discuss these work packages also more in detail later as an example. But first I will present more on this project, what this project is about, and why it is so important, this project. Because I think, well, and that is probably the main message, is that we have to equip our stakeholders in education, so the teachers and also the students, but also other employees who are involved in education with knowledge and skills so they can adapt very easily in times of change. So for instance, the pandemic was a time where change was important, so people had to change, but also now we have disasters or other things like just discussed, like the war. So that means that we have to adapt as professionals in specific situations. A small overview of my talk. I will try to do this in 15 minutes. It looks like a lot of information, but I will do this 15 minutes, and then we have 5 minutes for discussion. So I will outline the project. I will discuss some output and focus on the courses, give an example which I'm involved in, online education, and then some closing statement. This introduction. Well, here you see some of the members who are involved in our project. For a month ago, we had the first opportunity to see each other face to face. So that was really interesting and also good to see the partners face to face. But we saw our partners also in a hybrid setting because not everyone could be there due to several reasons. And we had this is what we call a peer learning activity, where we also learn from each other and each other's expertise. And this was actually about hybrid learning, so synchronous hybrid education. And this is the setting where students also receive hybrid education. So this is the KU Leuven in Kortrijk. And here you see some pictures of this environment, this learning environment. And we also witnessed that it's quite difficult when you are at several places, both online and also on site, to discuss and to talk with each other. But it's also good that we experienced this because students also experienced this like we did. And but there are also kinds of expertise also in KU Leuven, which we can use to in our several education systems. And this is also an aim of our project, this project to inform higher education across Europe and also in the world, actually, to see what is possible. And this is the hybrid situation. So the project outline. So what is this Digital Pro all about? Well, it's an Erasmus Plus program, and it's a 2 years project which lasts from April 21 to 23. And the coordinator is EADTU, which is now the guest here. We have several partners across Europe. The Open Universiteit of the Netherlands, so TU Delft, Technische University of Delft, the Open University of Catalonia, also partners in France, Italy, and Dublin City University. I saw someone from Dublin here in the room, and also KU Leuven, Belgium. You see the logos of these institutes, and we are scattered around Europe and work together. So the aim, well, the aim is what I already said, focusing on professional development of for digital teaching and learning. So we want to professionalize stakeholders, students, teachers, but also advisors, educational advisors, educational consultants on topics like synchronous hybrid learning, online learning, but also blended learning. The main aim actually is to design, develop, and implement courses for these stakeholders, so that we can help them to work in these environments who are changing and still changing, and a lot of technology is involved. So we help them to get more or less a sort of basis order to redesign their courses or their education. We also, because we have a lot of expertise within all these institutes on synchronous hybrid, online learning, blended learning, we want also to optimize models of learning and also of design, but also of implementing, because we also not only have this large expertise on these topics, we have also evaluations on the last period of the pandemic, where we also evaluated all kinds of the initiatives we did on professional development, especially, for instance, the Open University in the Netherlands. We professionalized a lot of teachers during the pandemic, when the emergency remote teaching was a fact, and we had to help them. So this was what we, for instance, did, and a lot of the participating institutes did the same. So we learned from that, and this is also used, this knowledge, and in these program we developed. And of course, this all has a larger goal, and we want to accelerate the modernization agenda and the digital transformation too. So a lot of objectives, here you see six of them. But also it's important that we collect a lot of new information, and also information across the world and in Europe on this change, also on online learning, on blended learning, on synchronous hybrid learning, which we can use and which we have used also in developing these programs for stakeholders in the educational process. And we use that for the design. So actually all the bullets before these, we use them to design, develop this continuing education process. And we organized 3 course circles focusing on online, blended, and synchronous hybrid education. And I will discuss these programs later on. So of course we have intellectual output. So these courses are intellectual output. But also we deliver papers on all kinds of developments regarding online, blended, and synchronous hybrid education as well. And these are, of course, all open access for everyone who are interested. So again, I will focus now on these courses we developed. So these courses were on synchronous hybrid, blended, and on online and distance education. And if we focus on these courses, what is important that we provide evidence-informed continuous professional development courses. So it's important that these courses are based on evidence, of course, our expertise, but also the evaluations of all kinds of research and programs of the last 2 years during the pandemic. So all these information is used to design these new programs. The target group, so all professionals involved in course and curriculum development. So not only teachers, also it's important, and can be important for students as well, but also other staff who is involved in the development of online, blended, and synchronous hybrid education. So it's a very broad target audience actually. So the topics are synchronous, hybrid, blended, and online. We just started these programs. The programs were developed earlier this year, but in March the programs all started. So simultaneously we had the synchronous hybrid, the blended, and online. And the modality of these courses, which I think it's important, teach as you preach, are identical to the topic which is central to the courses. So the synchronous hybrid focus, this course is also offered hybrid to the students, which actually is, if you look at the organization, much more difficult when you do it, for instance, online, which has also which is also, of course, difficult, and blended is also difficult, but it's all different because when you organize things online, both online and on site, you have to organize differently than you when you do it online only. So the number of modules is 6 and the study load is 30 load. So it's the basics. It's the basics of the educational formats which are central to these courses. So 30 hours. So you get a basis and you can use it for redesigning your course. So as a professional, for instance, a teacher, you can use this new information to do that. So if I, for instance, focus on hybrid, synchronous hybrid education, so the last bullet point, there is an assignment where the participants redesign their own course based on their acquired knowledge skills on hybrid synchronous learning and teaching. Well, this is a picture which is familiar to the one you saw earlier, because we were at Kula in Leuven in our own peer learning activity. But here you see the students on site and you see a group of students online and all participating in the course. So this is a quite traditional setting. You can also arrange all these tables and so on and create all kinds of group activities in a hybrid way and so on. So we learned about that during this peer learning activity in Kula also. Then we have the blended education, so alternating online and on-site in several activities. And after this course, the participants can actually design their own courses, also based on the information offered. And this course is also built on a previous Erasmus project, which is called Embed. So there was a kind of model developed there, and this model is applied in this course too. But the focus, if you look at this model, the Embed model, it's on several levels. You can organize and develop your blended education. The focus in this course is on the course level, because 30 hours you cannot focus on all levels, and for the stakeholders in the primary process, it's more interesting to focus on the course. So this is also interesting information. This is also open for everyone in higher education and other educational levels as well. Online education. So the online education focused on, of course, the definition, what it is, but also a focus on the shift during the pandemic. So the shift from on-site to online, which was very hard for institutes. We focus on that in several assignments because that's very actual, but it's not new because we did this earlier and also in other settings as well. So in the 90s, there was also a shift from on-site to online on a very small scale, but it was already there. So it's an interesting article which is called Shift Happens, and shift happens then, but shift happens also at this time in the recent 2 years as well. So a lot of information about orchestrating the classroom on assessment and so on, which is offered to the participants, which they can use in their education. And everything is also based on evidence we have, on ideas we have on online education. This is an educational model from the University of Catalonia, but there are other models, and we provide these models to the participants, and they can use that as well. So an example, well, this is the course Online Education. It is offered in a learning management system in the University of Catalonia, and we are now, as you see the schedule in the middle, halfway, so in May. So the introductory models are already have been ended, and now they are in the model on learning design, which is on instructional design, which I think is a very important topic, because if you design online instruction, especially online, you have to be very keen and should be very aware that you should design a lot of interaction in advance. So that's a very important thing. So also the guidance of students and so on. So this is an important module, but of course the other modules are also important. And it's also important that students are very active in this model. So we have in each model e-activities where they actually do think, they discuss information, well, that also means that we have to guide this as teachers as well. And the last model will be on emerging technologies, which I think is also important. We talk about new technologies, and new technologies are, of course, very important, and our students, but also mainly our teachers have also to deal with these new technologies. They have to see the advantages of these new technologies as well. Sometimes they don't know what is possible with these new technologies, so they have to be aware of that too. So awareness is a very important aspect in this course. So I will close because I think time is also an important issue. I'm not sure whether there are questions. So again, the main message of this project is to equip all the stakeholders in education with knowledge and skills so they can face all kinds of change, rapid change, and that they will not get all kinds of burnouts and these kind of things.
Yeah, well.
Colleagues, I thought you might also be interested that one of the other courses produced as part of this project, which we already completed, targeted learners. So it was called Digital Edge Essentials for the Online Learner. And as part of the project, we've had a single iteration of that course, but there have been previously 3 iterations of the course that have attracted 10,000 learners, of which 50% went on to complete, which is very high for an open course.
Could you say a few words about who you actually target with this and what the business model is and what you will do with that in the future?
You mean with our
well,
products?
you these models and you have a first intake, this is what I understood. But who are actually those who are learning there? Are these people who are teaching or in universities? Is that from the institutions that are participating in the project? Did you offer that wider, and is that an award?
Well, I have not an overview of all the projects. Maybe you can tell more about that. But I know more. I know who the audience is in our online education course, but it's very diverse. So I think most of the participants are higher education teachers, and there are a lot of advisors who give advice within higher education institutes, but also education consultants who have their own company who want to give advice to institutions as well. So these are, I think, the main participants in our course. I haven't seen students because I thought that would also be a very interesting topic.
So it's wide open, basically.
It's very wide open. It's very
teachers for, as you
yes.
said, information. Also.
It's not only teachers, but the teachers are there are a lot of teachers in this course.
Yeah, all involved in course design, and we have launched this European-wide. So it is not within the partnership only. It's not only peer learning. It's part of the project, but it's much wider. So we invited universities European-wide to participate in these courses. The courses are running currently. They are halfway, and after the courses have ended, they will be packaged and made sustainable to be used within a university. Okay. So there will be a package that can be used in a university with a
university could take that up and use it.
Yeah, it is open source and packaged to do so with guidelines. And we plan to rerun it also within the European Digital Education Hub, as there's the same target groups are there. So that's foreseen.
What's about the intake that you have for these different courses? I mean, for the online, for example.
We had a sort of a hybrid. We limited. It was limited because you have to require that people come on campus.
So this is why I asked for the online.
That was about 60 that registered for that, and then it was closed. And I think it was 150 or so for online and 175 for blended. But of course, you get the work going, and people are sharing that, being part of this, and then people want to step in, but it is already running. So they probably in the rerun we will have more.
Last question. I mean, what's the pace? I mean, you mentioned it's 30 hours. What's the weekly workload?
Each module is about 3 to 5 hours, and each model takes for about two weeks, 1 week and a half to 2 weeks. And there is one model because the content is more difficult. That is, I think, 2.5 weeks. About 2 weeks on average.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Very small comment. In fact, that's also a very good call for proposal with Erasmus Plus, which was specifically created and designed to reflect the COVID challenges. And in fact, this partnership for digital readiness was also the one where Ukrainian universities participated, and we had 2 projects in this call. But I wonder, since there is a flexibility provided by the European Commission for the Key Action 2, and this was on the Key Action 2 project, whether it is possible to integrate any Ukrainian university in the consortium. We understand that without funds, obviously you do not have any savings within due to the within travels, but in fact, just to open the resources for at least these courses you mentioned, they would be extremely important to be integrated for the teachers who are now also just teaching how to design and how to be guided actually for the students as well.
Yeah.
The registration is still open on the website of Digital, and you can only not for the hybrid one, but for the other 2, the registration is still open. It's not limited numbers there. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ivan. I think it would be welcome to have first a break. I think, John, if you agree with that, we first have a break. Oh, that's a strange time there. Maybe up till 10 past 11. Also for the people who are joining online. So we start again at 10 past 11. I'm trying to catch up time later.
The break is here next door, by the way. Thank you. So, yeah, next door.
Gelukkig was er een tijd. Ik denk dat het tijd
I know. You never know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
We should not give up.
No, not at all, not at all. If it's not this time, next time. Yeah, to the left.
It's controlled by the arrows on the keypads. So there's
I'll just go through here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I have to say, normally I stand and move around, so this is going to be
it's a
very
bit of a tricky room for that.
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Should we voice? Should you voice to come back because you have a better voice?
To call everybody back in.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So Rick said, thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, it's really nice to meet you, and good luck. Really, I mean that. Okay.
There's three key topics. Social the general picture or focus on your chapter?
The general purpose of together.
Okay. Please have your seats. We have to.
To my teacher's box.
Okay, we have to continue as we are already late in schedule. Welcome back here, and also welcome back for the audience online. Let us immediately start with the topic of diversity and inclusion, a task force that EADTU has been working on a bit more than a year, and we are presenting the results today, which will be also launched in a publication. So, John, please start.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very grateful to EADTU for the invitation to present at this summit. My name is John Butcher. I'm Professor of Inclusive Teaching in Higher Education at the UK Open University. My presentation will draw on a lot of the themes that have been brought out in the report George mentioned there, which will shortly be published. The report is called Diversity and Inclusion in Digital Education, and I will also raise a few questions about the extent to which our approach to digital higher education is as diverse and as inclusive as it might be. So just a bit of context from me. The Open University in the UK delivers distance higher education largely through digital means now to about 170,000 registered students. The hundreds of courses that are available, largely again digitally, are produced and managed from our Open University campus. A lovely picture of it there. I haven't been there for over 2 years, but I look forward to returning at some point. And we also, interestingly, from a UK perspective, have important centres in Cardiff, Belfast and Edinburgh to reflect different policies and funding regimes in the Celtic nations, which is quite important, I think, in relation to issues of inclusion and diversity. Just very briefly, the Open University was funded 50 years ago, but crucially with a social justice mission written into it like DNA. So the important slogan, I think, open to people, open to places, open to methods, is very helpful for us trying to do things in relation to diversity and inclusion. And that's manifest in the fact that the university has always been open access with no entry criteria. And unlike conventional universities, particularly in the UK, with a focus on adult learners who may only be able to study part-time. So we take issues of inclusion very seriously. So I just wondered if it was worth reflecting for a moment as to whether we are open to all in a way that the potential of digital higher education in theory offers. In the UK in particular, we are very aware that the most disadvantaged learners, potential learners, continue to miss out on higher education opportunities. That may be because they bring with them poor grades from school. Perhaps they lack family role models to support them in any aspirations to go into university. They may lack the necessary social or cultural capital to negotiate often quite complex entry procedures. But I think we've heard much already today about the potential of digital higher education to address some of these issues. And I think particularly if it's high quality, if it's media rich, and if it follows the kind of universal design principles that have been already mentioned. And I think my concern, certainly from a UK perspective, is at the start of lockdown, there was a bit of panic in the conventional sector about how digital aspirations would be met. And I might say something about that more later. It's also become quite apparent in our conversations and our meetings putting the report together, that there's a great diversity of approaches, but there is that recognition that some groups of students remain disadvantaged. And I think that's particularly from their economic circumstances. I think the affordability of higher education remains an important aspect in many countries. The fact that many students who perhaps are adults and are juggling jobs and personal caring responsibilities lack the time to engage with conventional approaches to higher education. Certainly the impact of disabilities on learners is profound in many cases, and even issues of geographical accessibility remain significant. And that, of course, is something that digital higher education is well positioned to address. So I wonder if we might reflect today on our own policies, our own practices. Could we do more to include a greater diversity of learners? And I think it's interesting that in a number of countries, inclusion policies are strengthened by legislation. So just some examples there. Other countries as well, it is illegal to discriminate on the basis of, for example, disability or race or sex or age. And that obviously strengthens the case for inclusion. But I think it seems to me this is a starting point and isn't enough in itself, and is perhaps not uniformly addressed across Europe. So on the basis of our report, I've pulled out 7 broad areas. So these are really 7 groups of students affected by significant barriers to higher education, and just raise some issues as to whether digital approaches could help. I think, first of all, it's worth reminding ourselves that the United Nations highlights challenges facing poorer students and the need for affordable approaches to higher education. And certainly, if I can speak from, again, my UK perspective, we do know the poorest adults are being squeezed out by fear of going into debt, particularly in England, which has a high fee approach to higher education. The Celtic nations are a bit more enlightened, I have to say. And it became apparent with our European colleagues that in some countries, these issues of affordability interact with accessibility as well. So the challenges and obstacles facing disabled students became quite significant, and the extent to which digital higher education may help us challenge those. It's also very apparent that approaches to social inclusion differ considerably. If I just take an example, in England, there are policy noises that are very positive about engaging a wider range of students, but the practices and the institutional inflexibility sometimes make that rather more difficult. In other countries, there perhaps are lower fees or different approaches to supporting students with disabilities. And as I think there's been a theme earlier, I think the more we can learn from one another in the space of social inclusion, the better. I think the second area that came through very strongly in the report was around digital accessibility. And I think this really includes 3 things. First of all, digital poverty, which in the UK we're getting increasingly interested in because it's not been sufficiently researched, I think, up until now, which can be at a very pragmatic level of, can students afford a decent laptop and robust broadband in order to study? It's at the point, as we've heard already, around digital literacy skills. So issues there that not all learners, even younger learners, are going to be digital natives. They may well be active online using the smartphone if they have one, but they may not be skilled and astute digital learners. And there's something there about how we might support all students to become better in that space. And the final one really, I think, is about accessibility, or as the problem is, inaccessibility. And this is the extent to which perhaps legal aspirations can help here with certain criteria around the design of university websites, with automatic, as it were, transcription of materials, with the principles of university design used to make material as accessible as possible. And I think increasingly coming through from some of our European colleagues was the idea of institutional support for students to get access to the right technology. So they may have access to some technology. We find at the Open University increasingly students are trying to study just on their mobile phones, and perhaps we haven't designed our materials to be mobile appropriate, and that then is a real obstacle for those students. And I think finally, a real theme that comes through in the later points I'm going to make is the need to really invest in the training of your staff, your teaching staff, your support staff, so that they are competent and they are confident in the work they do in the digital space. The third one that came through, and I think in the UK, there's probably been a strong history of supporting students in relation to functional disabilities as are defined in terms of hearing or vision or mobility impairments, and lots of positive examples coming through from our European colleagues. So the idea of providing equal opportunities for students regardless of their physical abilities came through strongly. Many countries have statements in support of reasonable adjustments, perhaps not everybody. And then I think it raises the challenge really of the extent to which digital higher education should be compensating individuals for their disabilities, the obstacles they face, or adapting much more inclusive approaches to their teaching to meet the needs of everybody. The fourth area that came through is very much in the realm of specific learning difficulties. Some overlap, I think, with the increasing number of students reporting mental health challenges, but not, of course, the same. And I think a recognition perhaps here that this is a space, I think, in which institutions of higher education are playing slight catch up in how best to meet particular issues, particularly those invisible disabilities that often depend on a student declaring a challenge and a university then in a position to respond to that. Again, I think will come through strongly, staff requiring training, students needing the confidence to make that declaration to their institution, and the idea that institutions can be rather more proactive than perhaps they are at present in adapting their materials in a much more inclusive way. Fifthly, and we've kind of touched upon the challenges in this space in Svetlana's excellent contribution earlier, the wicked challenge, I think, across Europe facing migrants and refugees and the displaced in terms of accessing education. And again, the potential impact of digital higher education is a really powerful approach, I think, there. But I think a recognition that perhaps we haven't done quite enough in terms of supporting language skills and cultural awareness, and even affordability and accessibility, recognizing those students who are crossing national and continental borders. I think one thing that didn't quite come out of their European colleagues is something that we're very conscious of in the UK, is our, as we would call them, our ethnic minority students from ethnic minority backgrounds, not so much in terms of participating in higher education, but we're increasingly aware of what I'm afraid gets called a black awarding gap. In other words, our black students are not doing as well as they might be doing. Not their fault. There's something maybe around institutions and how they assess students there. And I think that needs a bit more prominence in terms of where we're going to go in a more positive way as well. Sixthly, in terms of gender, really interesting case studies from a number of countries in the report. The data imbalance there is very similar across countries, particularly in terms of disciplinary differences. Despite decades, really, I think, both top-down and bottom-up work in this space, the disparities remain stubborn, particularly in relation to access to things like engineering and physics and IT in higher education, still dominated by males, and certainly areas like education, arts and health remaining disproportionately female. And I think the issues there is whether there's something in relation to digital higher education that can really challenge that. It seems to me in terms of diversity, there's a real danger of gender segregation continuing in those particular spaces. Again, colleagues in our institutions need training. I also think issues of gender equality become very important as a strategic driver there as well. And the final one from me and our colleagues really is, I think, a group of students who probably face the greatest insurmountable barriers in terms of inclusion. So this would be students who are prisoners, or as we briefly called them in the UK, offender learners, or as we now call them in the UK, students in secure environments, often likely to bring in very low prior educational qualifications, often from truncated schooling, often bringing with them mental health issues, and yet perhaps reachable through digital approaches to higher education if the kind of portals can be adapted sufficiently to meet the obvious security interests in relation to prisons and the need for very committed tutors with, I think, empathy and understanding of the issues that their students might face. So I think what came through from a number of different countries was the importance of national protocols and also binding frameworks to make sure that students in prisons have a right to higher education. So how might we make digital higher education more diverse and more inclusive? So I went back to John Daniels, who wrote this about distance education in 2007, and I think it makes a nice little checklist to take back to our institutions and our policymakers. So, is digital higher education sufficiently affordable? Is it priced at a level not to exclude certain groups of students? Is digital higher education accessible? Is it designed for the inclusion of all that range of potential students I've mentioned? Is it appropriate in the level of content and pedagogically engaging? Is it accredited? Because of course it needs to be portable, it needs to relate to the kind of employability that our students may be seeking. Is it acceptable in terms of high quality? We've, I hope, fought the battles that digital higher education is sometimes second best. We need to really preserve those high standards. And is it adaptable enough to meet the needs of individual learners, going away from that kind of groupthink? Is it adaptable enough to meet particular individual needs? And of course, as John mentions there, in terms of accountability, are we answerable to the right measures of success? So just a little checklist there to think about. So I wonder, are we at a tipping point? Are we at the point, as this summit and this report demonstrates, there are many enthusiastic colleagues in many universities making a positive contribution to increasing inclusion and diversity in digital higher education. But is it enough? Are our national policies sufficiently incentivizing diversity? I have to say, in the UK, particularly in England, they're definitely not. Do institutions practice inclusion as a matter of course? And some will talk a good game, but perhaps then their practice is rather different to that. So it seems to me, engaging with our colleagues as we did in putting this report together, there's a real potential for transformative approaches to diversity and inclusion. I just wonder if we're quite there yet. And I think, as I've spoken about, we've really been talking about equalising. And of course, there are more critical approaches to understanding digital higher education. And Oztok's book, The Hidden Curriculum of Online Learning, suggests our research in this space has been regrettably apolitical, that we should be looking much more at equity. We should be looking at much more of the impact of digital higher education on individual learners from disadvantaged backgrounds, and perhaps understanding much better how those individual stories might give us evidence as institutions and as sectors to improve diversity and inclusion. And I thank you very much.
John, for capturing the essence of the work of the task force. So it's within the slides and in your presentation. And you must imagine that these are contributions from 17 universities, bringing in 2 experts each, a group of more than 30 experts that gathered in 4 plenary sessions. And then every one of the 8 subgroups met 3 times, also separately. So this is the report is a result of a lot of work over 1 year of EADTU expert exchange, and you can get a copy of the report by.
At the end of the table, there's a QR code. If you scan it, there's 5 reports that are available just for you in this case. And we're going to launch them later this month.
Yeah, you are entitled to have the pre-launch, and we will launch it to the outer world later on. Any questions for John? Yeah, please, Mike.
Yeah, maybe I can comment from you, because I think and I'm looking also at colleagues here, Madali and Jakub, as we all sit in the Bologna follow-up group, and we have probably seen what you said, that there is much more awareness at the level of, at the policy level, for the need for inclusion, and so we have the feeling that there is really some progress. I can compare that to 10 years ago, where if you put into a search machine inclusive education, you get something about people who were physically challenged. Yes. So there is growing awareness, I think, but we still think that we are not quite there yet. We've seen the progress of the BFUG, where we have now, for the first time, really in our agenda, with a catalogue of 10 principles that we want to take forward, and that could be translated into a really institutional practice, and also enhanced practice at system level. What would be your take on? I mean, where should we start to do things? I mean, there's something to be done elsewhere, but everywhere. But I mean, what would you see from the point of, not so much from the point of the open university, because you have your agenda set, you have your target, but for higher education institutions in general?
I think the door is ajar. I think the first skirmishes have been gone through, but I think at the level of individual institutions, there's still a lot of work to be done. I think having the policies at a national level really helps, and I think some of those kind of legislative points I made are very, very important, because then people can't avoid doing things. I think in a sense we're at the point of needing a critical mass of people to take this forward now. I think it was really interesting that the enthusiastic colleagues across the European universities all had positive case studies. I have to say they had very different takes on diversity and inclusion, but that's okay. But I just get the impression, I'm not convinced that their enthusiasm is translated into senior staff at their universities to make strategies that will speak of diversity and inclusion.
Yes, if I hear the word inclusion, you cannot say no. Yeah, well, from the Flemish community side, we have been quite active in the last couple of years, especially in the field of inclusive mobility, because we ran several European projects on that topic. We started, as well as Michael said, with the students with disabilities, but then in the second project, we kind of broadened everything that we made, tools, web portal, etc., for students with disabilities to a larger group of underrepresented students, taking into account much more different kinds of disadvantaged students. What we did was also creating tools on different levels, on national level, but also on institutional level. And for example, in the field of inclusive mobility, we created a self-assessment tool that can be used by institutions. It's freely available now on the inclusivemobility.eu portal. And by using the self-assessment tool, all universities that already use it up till now, they really also feel that by filling out all the questions, they realize that they cannot do it on their own in the International Relations Office or in the Inclusion Office of the university, for example, that they really need to cooperate, because people often don't know within the institutions what the other services are doing. So the fact only that they are filling out the self-assessment tool makes them realize, I don't know this question, I have to go to my colleagues and I have to cooperate. And it also stimulates on higher level within the institutions, as you say, on institutional level, to create a strategy on inclusion. And now this was only focusing on inclusive mobility up till now, but we are now starting a new project, 1st of June, also together with ESU, and with the co-chairs of the Bologna Working Group on Social Dimension, to make similar tools for all principles and guidelines that have been agreed upon in the Bologna process. So not only for mobility, but now we will broaden also to other topics related to inclusion. So we hope that by doing that, it will also help not only at national level, but also at institutional level, to take further steps in the future.
That sounds really positive. I think that the challenges perhaps in the past, maybe even 10 years ago, we were still dealing with inclusion in a very atomized way, looking at particular groups with particular needs. And I think it has to inform institutions' teaching and learning strategies and approaches to support. And I think two things really. I think what we need is quality assurance systems to call out inclusion and diversity that people will then respond to. And if you have a chance to get in a lift with your Vice Chancellor, give them the 30-second view on why this would really strengthen their university if they were more avowedly diverse and inclusive.
Antoine, short last question.
Thank you for the report. I think it's very important for the European, at least the French, because I know the French are having in France in inclusivity. There's just a quick remark I would like to do. You put on the same slide ethnicity and migrants. And I think that in the French, in the European political context, I'm not completely comfortable with that.
I absolutely agree with that. The point about migrants and refugees very much came through from colleagues in Greece who were contributing to the report. But it was interesting to me that no mention was made of the challenges of multi-ethnic students in the university system. So I kind of slipped that in. Forgive me, I think they're separate issues as well.
Thanks so much, and I highly recommend to have a look at the report in which you find the definition of each of the topics, then the challenges for these topics, and then from the universities of EADTU representing good practices on how to go on these. Thanks, John. Yeah, we have to continue with the next presentation. Thanks so much. For the next presentation, we have a video, as Klaus Dieter from the Open University could not be here, but he was part of our special interest group on e-assessment. This was also a topic indicated by our members really as an important topic to address, and see how our universities are coping with e-assessment, especially as there is a bigger demand for expertise in relation to the COVID crisis at that point. Again, some 15 EADTU universities came together in several sessions and shared together the expertise on e-assessment on several elements of that. And in the meantime, Stefan is setting the video ready.
Almost, just a second. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, you can start. Also, this report will be on the down website, but the website that is down, but you will have access to it later.
Welcome to this presentation about the EADTU Special Interest Group and on online assessment and the report that we're launching today. My name is Klaus-Dieter Rosade. I'm from the Open University in the UK, and I speak for a small group of colleagues. That's Jose Janssen from the OU in the Netherlands, that's Carlton Wood, also from the UK, and that's George Uber from EADTU. The four of us have been chairing the SIG meetings and pulled together this report, and I'm now going to share my screen. And the presentation and the title of the report is Design Online Assessment, Solutions that are rigorous, trusted, flexible, and scalable. And before I go into detail, just some key pieces of information about the interest group. We started meeting in March 2021, and you can see here the numbers of the member institutions involved, the countries, the number of practitioners who joined the meetings on and off, and also contributions from people in those institutions that did not attend. We have a report here, and we have 15 good practice case studies attached to it. The report itself focuses on 4 areas, and that's assessment features, assessment design, trust, privacy, and ethics, and operational process and technology and support. And I will only be able to give you like a broad overview of what's in the report. Now, the one thing that we all realized pretty soon is that the assessment feature is already present. Online assessment is here to stay, and we are in a transition phase from exam board to online home exams. The distance teaching sector has a long history of home-based assessment, and for that reason, EADTU member institutions are perhaps best placed to lead with the current transformation. As part of the work, we just encountered a great variety of hybrid solutions to online assessment. Now, when we talk about future assessment, it's worth talking about the GISC report that came out early 2020, where they identified 5 principles, also based on surveys and case studies. The 5 principles of future assessments are authentic, accessible, appropriately automated, continuous, and secure. And what is interesting about these principles, you can see here some explanations of what is meant by these words, but what's interesting that they map really, really well on what institutions have already been doing during the pandemic and some of the directions of where they're heading going forward. Now, just also a reminder of what some people have said, and that's really a very small selection on the future of assessment. Way back, Bowd reminds us that assessment remains the most significant prompt for learning. And in a more recent study that looked at authentic assessment over the last 10, 15 years, I think, they came up with 3 principles. Authentic assessment should be grounded in realism, it should provide a cognitive challenge, and it should train authentic evaluative judgment, the ability to assess quality within fields. Now, it should also encourage and support, not undermine the learning process. And they talk about self-assessment, so embedded assessment that can provide formative information whenever possible. They can use gaming principles, low-stake assessment points, allow frequent repeats, potentially dynamic personalized progression, and performance data that could ultimately contribute to the final course results. Now, in the first chapter, here are some of the things that came up when you think about design. What is it that you need to look at? Well, there's a number of assessment points that we may play around with, and there's the stakes, the formative or summative, the weighting for each component, whether it's open or closed book, time limits. Whatever we do, we should always make make sure that we evidence the implementation with the future in mind. And like any institution, we all need to navigate quality standards that we subscribe to and with the student needs and the institutional and the regulatory context. We need to consider the balance of existing and new technologies. And once we're designing, I think there's great consensus amongst the group that some element of choice and capability should be part of the assessment design in the future. And why not also greater authenticity and personalization, which will also help us with questions of fraud and misconduct. Whatever we do, we need to take the academic staff along the journey. And just to give two examples of flexibility and choice, Tampere University of Applied Sciences in Finland, they added weekly assessments and final exam in an engineering course. And because of workload, they made it was automated, students could retake them often as possible at a time that suited them. So that's already taking some of those GISC principles into account. And the Universidade Aberta in Portugal, in their virtual pedagogical model, they actually have stipulated the degree of choice in the assessment. Students can opt for continuous assessment or a single endpoint assessment. And these are some of the flexibility and choice examples that came up. Now, the second chapter, trust, privacy, and ethics. We organized that around the notion of trust being a multi-layered concept. And the 5 layers here are technology, the deployment of technology, the organization of how to deploy it, the privacy and personal data processing, and reliability and fairness of the process. There is a great deal that can be said, and you'll find it in the chapter. But overall, we make the case here that we need to really have a holistic approach to enhance trust and build a narrative for stable, sustainable, robust solutions that also respect for data privacy. With regard to technology and its deployment, there could be as simple as choose technology for usability and user support, provide the right guidance to staff and students, and also opportunities to try out the system. With regards to organization, we need to balance academic standards with the ethical considerations of to the student experience of, for example, feeling overly scrutinized. And it will make sense where we can to involve students as partners in the decision-making of future assessment. Privacy and personal data processing. Transparency is important so that the purpose of data processing is always clear in relation to each assessment. And also that we ensure cybersecurity, fallback options if there's a data breach, and ensure that GDPR compliance of tools is safeguarded and protected. In terms of reliability and fairness, that's an important element for students. We need to verify identity and authorship, not just for the university, but also for fellow students. And students need to have trust in the assessor and in how the invigilated recordings, if that's what we do, how they are being assessed. And then we need to have very clear protocols for fraud detection and how we follow that up with students. Now, we're also making the case in the report that trust is a two-way street, and we can have a quote here from student evaluation also in trials in the Netherlands, the EU Netherlands. And if you read these quotes and ask you to be treated as a fraud suspect and feeling being watched, they don't even dare looking out the window. And those are not conditions, emotional states that will be conducive to a good performance. And a SIG member made some very interesting observations. And she says academic integrity is a pedagogical issue and should not be limited to not getting caught during the exam. We as an institution, we need to be able to trust our students that they will not lie about their methods, falsify their results, or plagiarize. These are fundamental values of academic work and need to be developed as such. That's what we need to do as well when we educate, when we develop our students. And we also need to teach our students to be critical of the surveillance society in which we live, not actually force them to accept it. The third chapter is about operational processes, technologies, and support. And there's some good examples, case studies as well. But here's just a reminder, when the challenges of the pandemic, when they became present, what were the questions that we asked ourselves at the beginning of this week? So how did institutions organize themselves to deliver the required operational processes? Well, face-to-face could actually be adapted for online delivery. Easy to say that now. It can. We didn't know really at the time. To what extent was the technology employed to assist with the operational processes? We often are large and we have a large number of students that requires technology to help us process the results. And of course, how did universities support staff and students? A lot could be said on this chapter. I'm just going into the deployment of technology. Some themes that came up with, well, there was a sheer range of solutions that were employed. It's quite impressive. Some of them in-house, some of them commercial products. And here's a plaque for the European the Tesla project that has a number of tools available as well, ready to be used. The deployment of technology with regard to proctoring and plagiarism is important, and the changes as they were being introduced, how they landed with the students, they could increase concern and anxiety among students, and of course, any other general difficulties that were encountered with technology. So, we're taking online assessment thinking beyond the pandemic. Let's remind ourselves what is it that we are here for. We have to meet the challenge of delivering capable, as we put it, capable, competent, informed citizens, adequate to the challenges of our 21st century lifetime. And where we are now, we can see how there's a growing demand for shorter flexible education, micro-credentials, short learning programs, CEPD. A lot of that will happen online. The special interest group has captured members' local expertise in how to design and plan institutional online assessment strategy during and post-pandemic, and that's what we're presenting here in the report. Some of the deliverables that will be in the report and also in the website that we are going to launch later. Inventory of challenges, practices in the development, example, research and innovation, identification of policies and frameworks that define the context assessment for the institution. And the EADTU SIG will continue to provide peer support to help address future challenges, contribute to further community building, to develop better assessment without the need to reinvent the wheel every time. And here's just a quick look at the references. I'll stop sharing now and just apologize once again that I couldn't be in person. I hope the discussion will be fruitful and that you find the report useful and helpful for delivering the online assessment that your institution needs and your students deserve. Thank you very much.
Okay, so far the video by First Dieter, and I hope it was clearly hearable, and the report is also linked to the QR code. Just one more remark is that the next step of the special interest group will be that we write guidelines for every university to take in their conversations their exploration of how they further will develop the e-assessment, rather than bringing the question to the table, what tool do we need to buy to organize the e-assessment, but really have guidelines to not miss out on all the elements that we have identified to be part of the process of developing an e-assessment policy. I suggest that we immediately continue with the next presentation, so that we also have time for the that will be us, Sandra. to that so that we can share the. Of course, we need to address the micro-credentials also. We want to give you an update on the context and what's happening with the EADTU at this stage. This form, I hope it will work for this form, the slides, but let's see if it will work for most of them.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to repeat it. This is the reference from the council proposal, council recommendations on the need for more shorter programs, scalable online programs, not only for the COVID situation, but also in line with the increased demand from learners, workers, and job seekers to upskill and reskill. And as you're a bit concerned about the the slides will not be to this form later on. So far, so good. What we envisage is that continuing professional development becomes part of the as a fully fledged area of higher education to be integrated in the educational system at institutional level as well as national level, being part of the funding system and fit business models. So we foresee to live up to the demand and the need for further continuing education. We foresee that universities in general offer next to degree education, open education, as well as focus also on continuing professional development. What does that mean for the stakeholders in this? Their positioning, what are the needs there? Is that at leadership level, institutional leadership level, we're talking about further development, extension, and institutional frameworks for continuing professional development. Employers expressing also the need for upskilling and reskilling of their staff, and for learners to find offerings of courses in CPD which are flexible and fit their study work life balance. Teaching staff more specifically are looking for expertise on developing these online programs and shorter programs, and governments and the EU are looking are developing frameworks also in relation to the Bologna by using the Bologna tools on offering formats of continuing education. Thanks for the wonderful slide. Yeah. So we foresee that micro-credentials will be a springboard for universities to develop fully fledged area of continuing education. Yeah, this is so misformed. I tried to make something out of this, but the what is referred to in the proposal for the council recommendation is that in relation to the definition of micro-credentials, there are some standard elements of it. Some are most important is the definition or the description of the learning outcomes, the workload, and the level of education. And some elements are more optional, but maybe preferred, is that they are stackable, and that's this description of ID verification and so on. It's all in the report on the council recommendation. Already, as you may know, EADTU has been working with the EADTU members on short learning programs and with the European EU Consortium on micro-credentials to define a common micro-credential framework. And this is, as you can see, fully in line with the policy recommendation and format of a micro-credential. So identifying the workload, the level, the EQF level, as well as the learning outcomes and the method of ID verification. In the meantime, we have already developed several micro-credentials in line with the CMF. Some conclusions at this moment is that we have the proposal council recommendation. It is already a formal description, but it is on the one hand also very general for the national governments and institutions to further discuss now on how to integrate that in the national educational systems. So the definition at this moment is just indicating it's smaller than a full degree, but bigger than one ECTS, and all space within there is open for discussion. As soon as the proposal is adopted by the member states, they have 12 months to develop their vision at national level, the vision on how to integrate and define micro-credentials in their institutional and national systems. Another disformed slide here is that, of course, we have then the policy, the recommendations by the European Commission, the adoption by the member states is foreseen. But what does that mean for the at institutional level? The institutional objectives on adopting micro-credentials is more in uplifting certificates that they are now providing with the shorter programs to more real qualifications, and by doing so, creating more transparency and a system of recognition between universities and also for companies, more on the recognition of what the value of the micro-credentials are. Further, the second objective at the institutional level is also to modularize more towards shorter programs and to serve a new target group for continuing education. And in collaboration with companies, provide more demand-driven offerings. So it's a real, a new approach for universities, in which the micro-credentials, of course, have to be valued by the users, the obtainers, on relevance, not only to the career of the student, so relevant for the student, but also relevant for companies, being recognized and of quality. They have to position that within actually new layers of qualifications. So we have the bachelor, master, and the PhD, but with micro-credentials being adopted within the educational system, we are thinking of by creating new layers of micro-credentials and micro-units. One is the first is about this is the system up till now. There can be further layers coming around, but this is at this moment from less than one ECTS, providing ECTSs for single courses, and then having the common micro-credential framework of about 5 ECTS, and then micro-credential programs, micro-degrees of 30 ECTS. But what we are going to do as a next step is to discuss at national institutional level on are there more layers needed and definitions, formats of micro-credentials. It's important now to work together in a dialogue at national and EU level, also to prevent that we start the whole discussions again that we already did within the microball exercises, within the consultations with the European Commission. A lot is already discussed, and these publications are very, very important to take to the table and build on that to develop the format of micro-credentials. Already many institutions have started discussing micro-credentials, but several in Ireland, France, Portugal, Austria, the Netherlands, and Belgium, they have already started the policy dialogue, and that is the next step. And we support these developments, but also in a wider audience, wider universities within our membership, within the MCE project.
Okay. So the MCE project gives the opportunity of actually all the partners in this sector, in this project, sorry, could play a role on a national level to make the modularization for continuing education more related to their own country. So building up already on experience maturated with 2 projects in particular, the European Short Learning Program and also the European Consortium, as well as the already mentioned Microball and the consultation group with the European Commission. We came up with this project, and it is a 3-year project started in April this year, and involved 12 partners. Specifically, you see we have Uninettuno, Cyprus Open University, the Open University of the Netherlands, the Union University of Università Alberta de Catalunya, the Hellenico Open University, okay, don't let me read all, you can see it. And there are also some associated partners that are mentioned on the right. So the main aim of the project are to investigate the learner perspective, to further develop the concept of microcredential, support the higher education institution, not only to develop policy for their own institution, but also in practice, develop microcredential. We will do testing, pilot, collect case studies, so will be really evidence-based, and with this evidence, we will develop then at the end policy. Sorry for the layout. Here is just matching the project objectives with who is doing what. So in principle, the learner perspective is further investigated by the University of Catalonia, and we will do a literature review, focus group, and then we will be at the end able to develop some recommendation. And this is the idea for all. So we collect what we have, we test, and then on the evidence and the results we gather, we develop a recommendation. The support for a higher education institution is carried by the Universiteit in Aachen, and also the Q11, but they have different tasks. So Leuven will be more on the piloting, while Veruni will more be on the understanding and mapping what is in each institution, and then build from that, also gathering from information from other VPs. The testing will be carried together by Uninettuno and UNED. And then at the end, we have the Università Aberta, the Portugal, that in principle will carry collect all the information and produce policies. And that's, you can see, that is done more at the end of the project, but it is an ongoing activities. So again, sorry for the layout, but more information can be found online. So what is the state of the project? I said that we started in April. The next month, actually no, May already. This month we will have a project meeting soon, so the monitoring is going on. And by the beginning of the summer, so in June, we can expect the first draft of the literature review, first draft of the mapping of the higher education institutional policy strategy in relation to microcredential, and the collection of case studies will also be done. To further stay tuned, you can follow us on Twitter, that are the hashtag, and our website is mce.eadtu.eu. Thank you. If you have questions.
Any questions? And I guess it'll also be taken to the panel, this topic, but if there's an immediate question in relation to the project itself. Yeah, please, Marguerite.
I'm not sure if it's to the project, but one of the slides you showed a table with the numbers of ECTS. And then there was the one 4 to 6, and then 20 to 40 ECTS. And I'm wondering what's in between, and what about initiatives between 40 and 60 ECTS?
Yeah, so this is.
I'm not sure if that is related to the new project.
Yeah. This is an inventory made by the European Blue Consortium and ESLP project team, which is continuing in MCE, but this is not a fixed model. This is what we identified as important layers based on what universities have indicated on where their current offerings are. But we will do that now within MCE to a broader outreach of universities, because we do not expect that we just say microcredentials are 30, 50, 80 ECTS, and that everybody will build towards that. No, we have to make inventory of what is currently offered at ECTS level, and then make a kind of a bandwidth or so to call it micro unit, micro degree, or so it's we are exploring how to make the layers, but that we have to make layers is clear. Otherwise, we would not cover the whole. And but we also want to prevent. We want to work towards a transparent overview of layers, rather than the certificates now that can mean everything. So we really are looking at a system that maybe needs a bandwidth, because it's not everyone.
If I may add something, you have also to consider that this mapping, this overview has been made before COVID. And after the pandemic, many institutions that were so impossible to have a short learning program was more than 30 ECTS. Now maybe they have it. That's why we are with the MCE project, so many acronyms so similar. We are mapping again what it is in-house for each institution to define the layer that George was saying, and maybe we will be surprised that will be similar to this map or that we already have, or very different, which is what we expect.
Yeah, if I may further comment, because I think there is a reason, of course, why in the EC consultation group and also in Microbol, we didn't set a strict range, and we set between 1 and less than a full degree, because we see that there is a lot of innovation going on in the institutions, and by putting ranges of ECTS, we also don't want to restrict institutions in their creativity and in their innovation. So I think we should allow for a broad creativity and development within the institution. So that's also why we did not restrict to certain ranges of numbers of ECTS.
No.
So I think that is still important. Also, if you do some kind of mapping, that you cover the whole range of initiatives, because otherwise there will be some initiatives that we still don't know afterwards, okay, how to call that or how to or where to place that initiative, let's say.
No. But the risk of the alternative saying it's less than a full degree and more than an ECTS, everything in between, then you can still call it a certificate. You have to indicate the value so that it also is attractive for students to really show the value of doing a course, a program of 30 ECTS or 1 ECTS. If it's all called a micro-credential, then
it is also too much broad as a label. Plus, who does I come back on the project that is running now. The institution that give us the overview of they are offering, they don't have to stick to this table. They can tell us everything that there is between 1 and under the degree program, and then from there we will also have not only training for them but also real pilot. So we will see all these layers that are in practice needed. That's why.
Yeah. It's at this moment an idea of working with layers, but we have to see in practice and also if it works with the universities.
So actually, we understand very well that the proposal of the Commission was going, also from my role, as I understand, was going for flexibility. But next to flexibility, there is also recognition and compatibility, and recognition not only in academia but also by employers, and they have to know what it is. Certificate, for example, certificate of 30 ECTS. If it has we have not given really names because there's now micro degrees, for example. If they understand that a micro degree has a volume of learning of more or less 30 ECTS, that's clear. If there is a CMF micro-credential of 5 ECTS, that's a volume of learning and particular that's also clear. And perhaps we need even more layers to understand what the effort has been and what the volume of learning has been for a certain layer. And so for the comparability, it's necessary to have some layers which are compatible for academia, but also for employers.
And it would also help what is so much promoted, the stackability, that you go build from one layer to one layer and from a micro-credential to a micro-degree and so on. But we will further explore the MC, makes the relevance of the project even more clear. I think you have to immediately go to the panel session. I hope you have time. Apologies that we have
one of the topics of the panel session.
Yeah.
So we can just follow up the discussion. Thank you.
Might be under. Where did you get that? Stefan has been moved something from the tape because we didn't. What are you finding?
No, with the, I got all my papers.
Do you want mine? I can even really discuss it on papers as well. Or maybe Jordan.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Oh, okay, thanks. I got all the names.
Not on purpose, of course.
I don't know. I don't know.
No, we're
There is one.
Deborah.
Deborah.
Maybe she might have put out because I think we can start with
She will join. Is that actually a student? Another one of your
Go, Michael. Yeah. Deborah, then Ivana, right? Michael, and you've got the weekend stay till 1 o'clock, quarter after. It's already it was a schedule for 35 minutes. We just, okay, we will just make it the same, right? We will go to 1 o'clock. Is that okay? Okay, so without any further delay, let us just begin the summit conclusions. I have the privilege to chair and to be in this session with Deborah Arnold, who is a representative of the ECO project, right? An expert on micro-credentials, which is one of the topics that we'll be talking about. Ivana Juraga, policy officer of the Digital Education Unit of the European Commission. Welcome, Ivana. Then Michael Gabel, Director, Higher Education Policy Unit of the European University Association. Welcome, Michael. And finally, Jakub Brodagy, Vice President of the European Student Union. A pleasure to be with you. So let us just begin with this this panel and these conclusions. We will be till 1 o'clock. It was since we are running late of time, we will try to reorganize the whole thing, and we will be 35 minutes. That will make it to 1 o'clock, even later. So please, Deborah, could you just begin and give us just some comments on the ECO project, and in particular on your role, or your position on micro-credentials.
Okay, I was actually making some links as well between the different presentations, but I can definitely follow on from what we heard about and that very interesting discussion about this granularity of micro-credentials. So in my very short intervention, I'm going to be drawing on both my research into digital education leadership and also my role as coordinator of the ECHO project, which is supporting the uptake of digital micro-credentials in higher education. It's an Erasmus Plus project, and EADTU are very important members of the project. So are UNED, working very, very closely with other partners as well on this. So yes, this discussion on the levels of granularity, and I think part of this is related to our understanding of what we're actually talking about when we use the term micro-credential. If we're using it to talk about the course itself or the learning opportunity, then I think this discussion about the volume of ECTS is very, very important for terms of in terms of comparability. But if we're talking about the micro-credential as the proof of learning, where we're talking about the artifact, the digital certificate, then I think we can go beyond that notion of granularity, because it is recognition of a particular learning outcome. And then that leads us to make this distinction between ECTS as recognition of volume of learning, which we all know is a very, very important currency recognized throughout Europe. And then flipping that a little and thinking about, well, we've got this shift in many European member states to competency-based learning. And when you look at what digital micro-credentials can actually do using the European Digital Credentials for Learning system, there's massive scope for including detailed information about the competencies developed, the competency frameworks that are being used, whether it's the European Qualifications Framework, whether it's the ESCO, Skills, Competencies and Occupations Database, or the national competency frameworks, and then how those competencies are being assessed. So I think there's real scope, and we also had the presentation on the assessment. So I think there's a real scope for having that deep thinking about what are we teaching in higher education and why, and how are we recognizing that through digital micro-credentials. And I think by shifting the debate towards these competency-based approaches would be really, really useful. And that's one of the things that we are doing in the ECHO project. We're piloting with ESCO on linking learning outcomes to the ESCO database, and encouraging as well the academic teams and the program teams to provide deep information, useful, usable information about learning outcomes in terms of competence and the way those are assessed. So that's the link that I would make there. I'd like to just look at the presentations that we had this morning in broader terms, and just pick up on some of the key terms that we had from Svetlana, Ivan, John, Klaus-Dieter, George, and Alessandra. I heard mentions of access, equity, and inclusion, digital capability, digital competence of students, academic and professional staff, cooperation, collaboration, and peer learning, strategy, sustainability, and scaling up, and the need to get these questions on the agendas and into the mindsets of senior management. So some of the work that I did in my research, so doctoral research, very, very recent, defended my thesis in February on leadership development and digital education leadership literacies, which is the question of mindset. So I'd like to make this link between the mindsets and values. Some of the values we heard were trust, empathy, inclusion, respect, transparency. One of the people who inspires me a lot is Lou Mycroft. I don't know if you've heard of her. She works in further education in the UK, and she's developed this approach which is called the practice of values. And it's a very nice way of getting beyond the institutional constraints that we have of the key performance indicators and refocusing on values. So it's actually a nice way of looking forward. if we take the value of inclusion and we just ask our question, what might distance education look like as a practice of inclusion? It opens up our minds to future potential ways. I think distance education is doing pretty well because inclusion is part of its DNA. But then if we look at online assessment and we go, what might online assessment look like as a practice of trust? Okay, and then that's asking all those questions about, is what we're doing in line with our values, the values that we want to defend? And then digital credentialing, micro-credentialing, what might micro-credentialing look like as a practice of equity? And as soon as you put those questions on the table, you start to rethink the way you're doing things. So I think it really is all about defining what we value in higher education and then how that permeates through to our practices reflecting those values. And that's my take on what I've heard this morning.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for your feedback. We will have some time for questions, and we'll come up with some of the issues just raised. Now, Ivana, I'd like to know your feedback and your opinion and reflections and insights on two important issues for EADTU, and two issues that have been referred to during this morning. These have to do with inclusion and cooperation. Just please, Rich, please start.
Yeah, thank you very much, and hello everyone. So building also on what Deborah was saying, I wanted to reflect on a few points that were discussed this morning. I found particularly stimulating John's presentation touching on issues of inclusion and access, precisely because as part of the Digital Education Action Plan, which is the guiding EU policy when it comes to digital education, access and equity is really at the heart of what we are doing there. So our guiding thought in this work is really to prevent digital from becoming just another format where we have a socioeconomic gap or a rural-urban division and so on. So preventing the digital gap or shrinking the digital gap is precisely why we have this policy. This morning in her opening intervention, my colleague Tina already spoke about a number of initiatives that we have when it comes to the European Strategy for Universities, and she also mentioned quite a few initiatives from the Digital Education Action Plan. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about something specific that we are working on that was not mentioned this morning, and this is a proposal for a council recommendation on the key enabling factors for digital education. And here precisely we will be focusing on the key elements that are needed to develop and implement a digital education ecosystem that is capable of delivering accessible, high quality and inclusive digital education for all. This proposal for a council recommendation will be looking at the lifelong learning process, so all sectors of education, obviously directly applicable to higher education as well. And the idea is really to look at challenges such as connectivity and equipment gaps, gaps in the digital skills of teaching staff, and gaps in the capacity of education and training institutions to adapt and digitize in an inclusive manner. Many of these challenges are often further exacerbated, for example, in rural areas, or they can be further exacerbated by socioeconomic differences. And even when we talk about pure distance learning in rural areas, we might have challenges such as slower connectivity speed, less access to supporting institutions such as libraries and other resources. So our objective with this proposal for a council recommendation will really be to set out what needs to be done for each of these factors in the form of investments and in the form of policy reforms, and also how we can monitor the progress as we try to move towards universal access to digital education. One other thing I wanted to reflect on, and I think John also raised, was the issue of learners with special needs, with various types of disabilities. So at the moment, we know that there are about 87 million persons in the EU who are living with some sort of disability. Obviously, these are not just young people, but in a lifelong learning approach, all of these persons are potential learners. Specifically in the context of higher education, we know that the percentage point difference in tertiary attainment is actually about 15% less for persons with disabilities than it is for persons without disabilities. So as part of this work, we will certainly also be looking into the accessibility of assistive technologies and making educational technologies in general accessible. This is a topic that we think needs to be talked about more. And it's definitely something that we'd like to be reflecting on. So maybe I stop there and leave some space for the others.
Thank you very much, Ivana, for raising such an interesting topic such as inclusion and disabilities and disabled students. The need that universities have to collaborate and develop innovative and groundbreaking projects. Thank you very much. Michael, probably we are just going back to micro-credentials. This is something that you just want to
I do that, but
okay, the floor is yours.
But I would come back that and share some more general observations. So hello, everybody, good to see you. And as I have been a regular at these EADTU summits, I just wanted to share the observation that I think this is my first attendance at a hybrid EADTU summit. I don't know if that's actually your first one, you know, that's kind of interesting. So I have to really keep in mind that this is not just talking to 30 people talking here in the room, but to another 100 who are online. And that's really interesting. And it's probably one also where one of the points where you start to think about what have we actually learned during the past 3 years and what's going here to stay. And I think that's the uncertainty that we face all at the moment. So we have seen in the past 2 years what we can do, what we cannot do, or what we could better, what we don't not actually know yet, what we want to do, as online is no longer default for us. So open for discussion, for exploration, and I think I agree that online assessment is probably one of the things that is here to stay. And that this is not just about getting it online, but about enhancing, improving assessment. So in whatever setting you do that, we need better assessment. I took up the word of stealth assessment, which I think is a very elegant way to put it. Inclusion is, of course, not only for distance learning, and Ivana has just given a very good overview on what we have to do there on the online side. I agree with what John has presented here on the policy level is one thing, and then the institutional leadership as well. I'm leaving from here to an event on inclusive excellence, and there are a few points to be made. And I think we have progressed. You know, it's no longer that excellence and inclusion are seen in juxtaposition, but I think we are not yet really clear about the actual connect between the two and the conditionality of the two. So I think that's an important point to be taken forward. And so it's, and this is for us, I mean, we are representing universities, so we're dealing with university leadership, so raising awareness there. That's, by the way, the benefit of quite a few things that the European strategy and the European university initiatives address. They're not all very new. Some of them are actually, they have been around for 10, 20 years, like quality assurance, recognition, and I mean, at least colleagues who are in the Bologna process always assume that this is all done and dusted, and but we are aware that this is not the case. And I think the encouraging thing is that they have been lifted up in the attention, so they are discussed nowadays, not just by a few colleagues who have to solve these problems in the institutions, but they have gone up to leadership level and to policy level. And I think this is a real good opportunity. So I take up what Tina said this morning. It's the European strategy is not a top-down strategy. It's something which is rather hand-on, which sets out some very clear projects on which we can work together, policymakers and the sector. It's not, and we should have a stimulated discussion. And I think this is why I find it so important that the Commission publishes information about it that it has, such as feasibility studies, because that can be helpful for all of us, even if this is not a success. We all know that from research. We should not only publish on the positive findings, we also should be published if something didn't work out or wasn't good. Brings me to micro-credentials, which I think is another thing that it has been around. We know that for some years that institutions observe more move towards more flexible provision, and some of these courses have been around for a while. We didn't call them micro-credentials, and now they get more attention, and I think this is really good. We still think that the Bologna instruments are applicable until somebody shows us the opposite. We also agree with what you said, George. We see it as a springboard probably for, and you can jump in all kinds of directions. And one, I think that I wanted to emphasize here is that I see it as a portfolio as well for lifelong learning. And this is something that we have to emphasize. It's not just about getting vital skills to people and contributing to the labor market sector. I think we have to raise attention again to that the lifelong learning mission of institutions is broader and quite diverse, ranging from children universities to reorientation, integration of migrants, and up to third-age universities. I think it's something that is not so visible, so I think we should follow the micro-credentials, but also use this occasion to point to the fact that universities do more than just provide micro-credentials. I think we don't see yet a clear path or a clear agenda on how to promote the lifelong learning mission of the university. I find it a bit blurred at the moment. We have seen how some of the things that universities do actually do not get popular at the level of institutions, but elsewhere. If you think about the MOOCs, they're provided by universities, but it's actually, they get visible through US-based platforms. And I think that's something that we have to take into consideration when we discuss micro-credentials. So and also lifelong learning, because that goes beyond what the individual university can do. So I agree with you, it needs national and it probably needs European frameworks as well. I think that's what I wanted to share here. So thanks a lot. I learned a lot and took a few things with me, and happy to promote some of the outcomes here on our platform.
Thank you very much, Michael. We are really happy to listen to those outcomes. Now, Jacob, I would really like you to provide the students' perspective on these issues, but without forgetting to reflect the policy side and the implementation. All right? So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. It's very pleasure for me to be here physically and getting rid of the number of Zooms gradually from that happened from the last year. So it's a very refreshing situation. So basically, I wanted to bring a bit of the perspective on how it looks for an average learner, actually, because we are talking about the topic about the revolution on digitalization that our institutions, our higher education systems undergoing, but the learner who was actually enrolled in the times of the crisis, and I'm speaking about the 3 years that from now on the back, we had the COVID crisis, now we are having a war in Ukraine, and to all of these realities, the digitalization revolution is definitely contributing to overcome. It's about the communication between the students, it's about the communication within the higher education institutions. We've seen this whole development, and we are actually like basically dealing with the fires from the students' perspective on the community side, how we were dealing with these topics, because that impacted all the learning and teaching reality, that impacted our assessment, that impacted our actually a lot of dreams of students, like how they would ideally see their reality. And for us, this time was kind of longer from the perception, because it took already a half of the regular lifetime of a student, of the average student. Yeah. So we are talking about this, and ESU as a European Students' Union, basically we are representing student unions from the countries, recognize students' bodies in the countries, and we are also see very differences between the different countries, how the topic of digitalization, as any other as well, the inclusion and so on, are being tackled very differently in the different countries. I mean, we are talking about a situation that the unified approach on some topics that we're discussing today is completely, for example, not touched in some policy discussions in others. We are trying to encourage our student unions as well in countries that it's not a topic to put it on the agendas with their ministries, with the policymakers, because at the end, the implementation of the policy to make it topic visible on the country level also should be coming as well for the learners, especially if that's not being seen in the national strategies. Reflecting on the beginning of our meeting today, basically we encourage the reality that the digital education action plan is there and is concerning the different topics that are related to the issues such as capacity building for the learners and teachers to go with the digitalization process, but as well as addressing the technological, actually fighting with the digital divide within the countries. We are having very diverse reality in Europe as well. We are having countries with the ratio of digitalization of 97%. I think that's in case of Netherlands, and I think we are reaching as well the countries with the 56-57% in some parts of Europe. So before we are talking about the digital learning, digital universities and so on, this topic has to be as well supported, so that's very welcome. There have been also the mentioning of the European Students' Card, so all these digital processes will be as well supporting from the technical side this easiness for learners to maybe migrate even in a more easy way, to take the mobility periods much easier when it comes to access to the resources, the infrastructure, the libraries within the universities and so on. So we are closely monitoring that topic. Also for many student unions, actually the Students' Card is a way of their operation of the day. So student unions are actually managing the Students' Card, so integration with that will be crucial to say. Of course, the topics here about what was said about the digital projects and about the presentation about inclusion are coming a bit together. We have to look on the digital learning. We have to look on the way how we are delivering the digital education in a similar way that we did on the physical. We are putting the students at the center, and that should be the principle, where we are addressing the issues that might be added in the digital reality, but at the end, learning and teaching, high quality learning and teaching, and taking into consideration all these aspects. And I really enjoyed the presentation about the social dimension aspect. And indeed, in Bologna follow-up group, the principles and guidelines for the social dimension are becoming more and more visible. So hopefully in a few years that will become a bit mainstream in the political reality. That was a big achievement in this sense. Of course, yeah, just to giving up some numbers still to the topic about to the topic around the accessibility and the reality of COVID and the situation of digital readiness of student body. We have conducted the study within COVID, and 22,000 responses have been acquired over the study with the Croatian Zadar Institute, and actually 41% of learners didn't have a well internet connection in the sense of a high speed that would allow for the good quality access to the classes. 37% didn't have a quiet place to study due to isolation in the houses when it comes to cohabitation with the family and so on with the different people. So that was not the case as well. And as well, the quality of the good learning materials. That's another revolution that has to be addressed in a sense of preparation. So very much welcome the initiative such as digital that would equip the learners and the teachers with the tools to provide this online learning possible with the high quality. And actually for the future and the general policy view, how do I see it in the upcoming years? We will be on the way also to rethinking our approach when it comes to, for example, standards and guidelines. We will be facing towards probably the revision. At least the first step would be the common project between ENQA and the stakeholders within European stakeholder organization, the project called QA Fit for the Future. So also the reflection of the standards that will be happening around the digitalization aspect, I think, will be addressed over this report. We're gonna take all of the lessons learned within these years to make this also accountability procedures adaptive for the future. I'm a bit running in circles because there was quite intensive meeting this morning. It's like a lot of lessons learned here. So that would be initial thoughts from what I had on the topics in here. But definitely the discussion can be asked, and we can move forward with the topic. Of course, I didn't touch the micro credentials. I didn't want to open the Pandora box. We have a separate policy on micro credentials as European Students' Union. There are dozens of recommendations there. We are also considering non-formal learning in the as a part of the opportunities there. Definitely the flexibility for the students, and of course recognizing that there is offer coming from private, from the universities and the different areas, and finding the way towards that. It's quite hard, but from our perception, I think the most important issue to tackle forward is actually what Michael was saying, the implementation phase, because we've seen how, for example, Bologna tools have been implemented 10 years ago, and in some universities, in some systems, when this was not much of, when there was bigger understanding of where it's all lead, for which reasons it's happened, it was way easier. To some countries that basically the implementations just landed and then has been translated by the universities in completely different ways, which ended up to the kind of resistance from the teachers' body to the students, to the management, and so on. So I think if we have such a big overarching topic coming as well, it's way more important to communicate that in the way that will step out from this, I would say, still a bubble that understands the topic, right? Because we are talking about a few thousand people that maybe are into micro-credentials topic around Europe, but the policymakers, the managers of the institutions, the students are not yet there on the same page. So the next years will be there to come as well in the communication side. Yeah, that's the end of the conversation.
Thank you very much, Jacob. I mean, you just walked through, all the different and diverse topics that were covered in this morning's sessions, and congratulations.
I see myself on the last of the list. I thought the conclusion.
Yeah. All right, but we still have 5, 8 minutes, even 10 minutes. And I would like this to be interactive, to be dynamic, and please feel free just to ask any question. Mike.
I thought I'd just join together the equity, diversity, inclusion conversation and micro-credentials, because some of you may be aware we were involved in quite a comprehensive literature review on micro-credentials last year. And I have a report that less than 2% of the published literature on micro-credentials had any focus on equity and inclusion and the like. And similarly, the literature was absent in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals. So this may be a lag in the published literature, because the published literature does not always reflect what's happening on the ground. But I think that's interesting. Maybe just one other observation. We also identified that there was a very high bias towards higher education institutions, but similarly, despite what we might read in the popular literature about the opportunities for industry partnerships and new lifelong learning pathways, about 85% of the literature that we identified adopted a single institutional business model. So that collaboration wasn't evident.
Any comments?
It doesn't surprise me, Mark, to hear those findings. From looking around at what's being done on the whole micro-credentialing field beyond Europe, I think there are inspirational models where I have seen in the United States that model that Mark's just talked about, where you have industry partners, local government, higher education institutions, learners and workers, all looking at what a particular geographical region or territory actually needs, with a focus as well on upskilling for more disadvantaged learners, and actually designing together those micro-credentials and then reverse engineering the course that actually leads to that. And so that I saw as a very, very interesting, collaborative, sustainable, needs-based approach to micro-credentialing. It's only one example I've seen of that I know of, but it's very interesting to look at that from the point of view of a model. And then we won't go into the New Zealand micro-credentialing landscape, again, which from what I understand is industry focused. But I do definitely agree with what Michael said about this need to really think about what it means for us in higher education, what it means for the traditional learners and what it means for the non-traditional learners, and flagging up, yes, the lifelong learning mission of universities.
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, Michael.
I would just to thank Mark for providing the evidence. I think it just confirms that we should not just do things that pay. And I mean, this is not what we do in education generally, so it would be strange if we would do that in the Bible credentials. I think there are some myths that are around, you know, that this would make universities rich, and this not and only if you produce that what sells, and this is already done by the for-profit sector, so we may not have to do that.
More questions? I think some other topics, I mean, related to inclusion, cooperation, disabled students, digital bridge. By the way, you mentioned digital bridge. Is any other? Yeah.
Can I have a second bite?
Of course, go ahead.
A gap in, again, around the equity, inclusion, diversity theme is, well, we take at Dublin City University some pride in being an inaugural member of the Age-Friendly University Network. So digitization for, should we say, the third age is a massive challenge. It's a ticking time bomb in terms of our society. And even in the context of the Digital Education Action Plan, I think we need to consider not just our youth and skills and what to be honest, the silver economy is huge, as it's quoted. So there are really good reasons for partnerships with industry in this area. Last year in Ireland, I was involved in a project with Vodafone to develop a site to support digital skill development. But I do think that that's an area that we're not perhaps focusing on. I pick up on the inclusion of special needs, because I think that's massive as well. And when you combine those, because sometimes they are combined, that even gets more what gets amplified. So sorry, a comment rather than a question.
I'm pretty sure that Anna I'd like to say something about it.
Yeah, I mean, thanks a lot for bringing it up. I didn't mention it in my intervention, but it's definitely something that we are looking into very much. As I'm sure you're aware, we have set ourselves a target of having at least 80% of the adult population with basic digital skills by 2030. According to the data from 2021, we are at 54%. So there is a long way to go, and we are absolutely aware that reaching the generations who are no longer in education and training is essential to this effort. We will be preparing another council recommendation on the provision of digital skills in general. And we are looking in the context of that also at adult education, at non-formal forms as well, targeting specifically those higher age groups. But I have to say that it is also a challenge in terms of literature and in terms of evidence collection. So if you have any studies in that respect, we would be very, very happy to see them, because it is something where we are looking for evidence actively and often struggling to find something that's systematic and going beyond anecdotal.
Yes. Yeah, all right. We're just on time. And it's been a long session, so thank you very much. Thank you, the four of you, just for your contributions, and thank you for making this possible. Thanks all.
There's a lunch meetup next door, and our website is back online, so please.
You should have done it.
Perfect timing.
Digital Irish.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
Next week.